Hello and welcome to the Business Tech Insights podcast. I'm your host, Brad Nelson, and today I am joined by Sealy. Sealy, would you introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Oh, sure thing. Thanks for having me, Brad. My name is Sealy Hambright. I'm a scientist by training. I have a PhD in neurobiology, and I was an academic for a while. And the last few years, I've been an entrepreneur of sorts, and started a wellness clinic with some like-minded founders here in Aspen, Colorado, where we provide holistic therapies and programmatic approaches to longevity medicine and general wellness. And just recently started another company where we will provide telemedicine care, virtual care for not only our clients here at Bay State in Aspen, but also other clients nationwide to provide therapeutics and testing, drop ship to home, to really kind of provide more of a continuation of care for our patients that are here because it's a very transient town that we live in. But yeah, that's my brief background. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Tell me a bit about your scientific background and what was your thesis for your PhD?
It's very boring. I don't know how much you want to know.
Give it all to me. Give it all
Yeah,
to me.
yeah. No, my PhD is actually in neurobiology. I studied the biology of aging to more direct.
Hmm.
I studied the cellular mechanisms that lead to neuronal decline, principally those neurons that are affected in Alzheimer's disease. So we used mouse models to better understand the deriving modalities of neuronal cell death that occurs in these diseases, and then ways to mitigate that, obviously. And so we published this in a series of different papers. But that was really a great experience, especially using preclinical models like that. But then I became a stem cell biologist. So once you get a PhD, you then do what's called a fellowship or a postdoc. I did that in a stem cell lab that was a very translational lab. That means that we really try hard to convert things we find at the bench or in the lab to patients through clinical studies and clinical trials. And so I was very fortunate to be able to be involved in several of those trials using different stem cells and understanding what happens to stem cells when we get older and why those might not be efficacious as a therapeutic when you get older. Published a variety of things on that front, obviously. And then I was a traditional kind of academic, what we call a principal investigator after fellowship, where I wrote papers and I wrote grants and I led a team. I was a program director for healthy aging, and that's really where I started to shift, to be honest, and where I was developing certain tools. Like we patented a couple of blood testing technologies that we came up with, um, and we were doing these trials and these smaller studies, but it wasn't seeing the light of day, if you will. And we
Hmm.
weren't getting these therapeutics to the patient very quickly. And oftentimes these therapeutics are either over the counter or easy to source or very complementary to other kinds of therapies that you could use. For example, like simple vitamins as antioxidants that work really, really well, especially paired well with surgical procedures for recovery, things like that. So I started a company here in Aspen, Colorado with, again, some like-minded co-founders, where we could provide some of these programmatic approaches to healthy aging and longevity. Because really what we found was like people really, I think, resonated with the concierge medicine element, the hand holding through these processes. They're like, there's so much information out there. What can we actually do? What works? What doesn't work? And so that was really the impetus for doing it. And it's been a lot of fun. We still have a lot of room to grow, but it's been exciting.
So then,
Yeah.
is your wellness clinic? What is your main goal? Is it to help help people live longer, healthier lives, and try to stop some of that stuff that you studied with the neurology and the stem cells in older folks?
Not at this particular clinic. Another business that we started, we were doing some regenerative medicine things, which I can talk about if you like. But the one
Mm.
here, we principally focus on holistic interventions. These are things like contrast therapy, infrared sauna mixed with a cold plunge. We have private rooms for that. We also have a
Mm.
red light bed, and I would say a suite of different infusion therapies that are not state of the art, or we're not there's no intellectual property behind these per se. We would say it's the combinatorial approach of using these generally holistic interventions, but paired and complemented with other on-site interventions in a programmatic way that really makes a difference. So to answer your question more directly, we do want to increase wellness and increase longevity, but what we really focus on when we say we want to increase longevity is we want to increase health span. You probably heard these terms health span versus lifespan. We don't just want to extend life, chronologically and make it longer. You want to live longer but healthier. And so a lot of these interventions are certainly suited for that. They can reduce inflammation and they can increase pro-regenerative soluble factors in a patient, for example. And we have a very active community here in Aspen. So I think it's very popular because these are really great tools for that very active lifestyle. So so in that sense, it's a great place to have this business. There's other negatives to a small town having a business, I will certainly admit. Um, but yeah, I think that's our major mission, if you will. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Now I've heard of Aspen, Colorado, but I'm not super familiar with it. How many people live there about, do you say?
It depends on who you ask. It's around 5,000 or 6,000 like full-time residents
Hmm.
per the census. But the issue is it's a resort town, mainly a ski resort town. It's also very hard to access.
Mm.
So we have a lot of transient people here that will come in for short term and then leave. So they like the interventions we have. They want to get an IV, they want to do hyperbaric chamber, but retaining that client can be difficult because they don't live here. So that's in fact why, in part, we started this new virtual health platform where we can kind of keep track of them and have more of a client retention, if you will, because we can send a lot of things to their house. We can get testing kits shipped there. We get phlebotomy done where they live. We could ship different kind of genetic tests and things to their site. But yeah, so it's a small town with a very transient um, uh, demographic, and it's also very affluent, which is nice. I will say, but I think the biggest hurdle is really the transient nature of our clients here. And as you can imagine, it's very seasonal on top of that. So transient in terms of visiting, but it's very seasonal as well. So there's dead periods where we'll actually be closed for an entire month. It's just a ski
Oh,
town. So
yeah.
that obviously adds caveats and complexities to the business itself and the staffing of the business. But more importantly, the client retention element, which we're trying to solve. Yeah.
So then tell me more about the telehealth. Is it just general telehealth, or is it just like what you said, just keeping up with customers that you have walk in the door?
Yeah, that was the original, yeah, use case, if you will. We want to retain those clients, but then we started thinking about it, and it really allows us to expand our offerings as well. We can partner with more pharmacy vendors, for example, and we could do more personalized approaches. So we envision, I mean, we roll this out next month, so we haven't started yet, but
Oh,
we
okay.
envision having obviously clients that come in here that want that continuation of care. So we can get the peptides sent to their house. We can get this off-label drug sent to their house. We could do blood work on site. But we also envision clients that are just in our network or might hear about us through online marketing. They can join up and have a complete virtual care program for them that doesn't involve the things at Bay State here. Like it might not be on-site HBOT or contrast therapy, but they still would need some provider guided, coach guided um, aid for their wellness journey. And so we can prescribe, like I said, and obviously get testing done at their site. So we kind of expanded it out to collect individuals in different arenas as well. And lastly, which we can talk about if you want, but my background's in regenerative medicine and stem cell therapeutics. We intend to have a clinic in Florida where we will have regenerative medicine therapies that could really benefit from this virtual care approach as well, because there's always protocols you want to maintain before you get the intervention and after that can really boost the efficacy of stem cell therapies or biologic therapies. So we will use that virtual health telemedicine platform to communicate, engage with, and track our patients before and after. So it really is a multi-use framework, but we're really excited about it. But here in Aspen, it'll be the most robust in, I think, retaining our clients and having them come back when they're in town as well, and keeping in contact and providing care. Honestly,
Mm-hmm. With,
yeah.
so with the clinic you mentioned, why Florida? Is there already a clinic there you're going to partner with, or you're going to open a new clinic in Florida? And why not Colorado?
That's a fantastic question. So Florida is really unique in that they have, and this is actually kind of recent, they have, I would say, more allowable legislation or a compliance or regulatory framework that I'm supportive of, obviously, that allows more leniency for physicians in that state to utilize different biologic therapies in different indications. What
Hmm.
do I mean by that? So every state's different when it comes to regulating what we might call stem cell therapies or biologic treatments. There's a lot of dividing lines that dictate that regulatory framework. But what I will say, one of the big lines in the sand is the use of your own biologic product, which we call an autologous biologic product. So your own stem cells given back to you, for example. And
Hmm.
there's allogeneic stem cell products. That is using stem cells from an outside human donor to then use for your own therapeutic benefit. That line has traditionally been a pretty hard line. This applies to exosomes or stem cells or even other biologic products. In Florida, there are very specific, but yet there are allowances for the use of allogeneic cells. So cells from someone else going into you. And we think, and we found, and I published on this too, we collectively feel like that gives us more of a canvas to work with to improve the efficacy of those therapies because you can have donor selection priority, if you will, where you can get really healthy stem cells from really healthy donors, oftentimes younger donors, adults, but younger adults.
Yeah. Mhm.
Those work much better. In gerontology and really the biology of aging, there's some simple things we know work. Fasting works for a variety of reasons. Also, young biologics work really, really well. Young blood is an amazing tool. So we
Hmm.
could do therapeutic plasma exchange as well in a very safe and compliant way, obviously. But the rule in Florida, without getting into too many details, allows the allogeneic use of cells that are manufactured in Florida, principally. That's the safest way to go. But they're manufactured under FDA regulatory standards. So we call that GCP for the clinical practice and GMP, good manufacturing practice. So these are very, very scrutinized, but yet Florida allows the use of that under these scrutinized frameworks. And we want to leverage that and leverage that regulatory landscape to do more therapies and really kind of push the envelope in regenerative medicine as well.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I know nothing about this, but I'm assuming that using the younger stem cells, you said it's allogeneic. Is that
Hmm.
the word you used? Yeah,
Yeah.
using those cells on somebody older, is that more effective because generally as we age, our bodies degrade and you have more viable stem cells or just better quality stem cells? Why would you go that route instead of just taking them from the same patient and giving them back?
It's a great question. Both work, by the way. So it's not as I really try to shy away from prioritizing sometimes where it's like, this is
Hmm.
always better than this.
Hmm.
I think you can make general statements that a younger biologic is going to perform better, but you can have a younger unhealthy person, right? Um, and to answer your question, there is some kind of degradation that occurs with age. We know about that. We know what happens
Hmm.
at the genomic level. We know what happens at the epigenomic level that leads to deleterious effects in the cell, at the cellular level. And this also applies to stem cells as well. They seem to have a different, what we call a phenotype. They spit out more pro-inflammatory factors. They spit out less pro-regenerative factors. They just don't work as robustly. And there's various different mechanisms that control this. One of those is actually what we call senescence, which is what I've done a lot of research on. So if you can reverse some of those senescent phenotypes, you could get a better stem cell. So to answer your question generally, yeah, a younger stem cell, a younger biologic, younger blood with the growth factors that are there works better. And it works better because sure, there's degradative things that occur with age, but there's also an orchestrated milieu in blood and in the stem cell niche or in your organs, I mean, in the various different locations, that's well maintained. We call that being in homeostasis. The younger you are, the more homeostatic or maintained those signaling factors are. And it's a better functional cell and a better functional biologic. So, yeah, generally speaking, young biologics, young blood, young cells will actually work better. I will say it's definitely worth mentioning, and I've done research on this as well and published on these elements. You can improve yourself your own physiology. So if you get an autologous therapy, that is to get your own biologic or your own stem cells given back to you for like a knee injury, for example, you can improve the efficacy of that by improving your own physiology. So we've done a lot of work to better understand how we can improve that patient to really optimize them to obtain an enriched stem cell product. You can do that through fasting, through senolytic therapy, through dietary changes, through a fitness regimen. Those actually work really, really well. And you can kind of clean up the system to some degree, and then you
Mhm.
can get them improved protocol. So what I mentioned earlier with the virtual health tools, et cetera, the protocol before intake or before the procedure and after is just as important as after, because we can kind of prep you for that autologous therapy. We want you to be your best self to give yourself the best stem cell product you can or biologic product.
Definitely. Well,
Yeah.
so why the switch from being an intellectual and that sort of thing into an entrepreneur? What was the switch that made you decide to go into business for yourself?
I'm not even good at pretend like it was a good switch. I don't know. We're still learning. It might have been a mistake. But no, I mean, like, I think philosophically for me, I alluded to this earlier. I wasn't seeing the findings translate to the patient at the cadence that I thought it could. Because again, people often think about clinical trials and like drug discovery and like the big companies as having this really, really specific, oftentimes patent protected IP around a very specific drug or something that they have to spend decades to study, which is true. But sometimes you can find things or you can generate tools like I did at my previous clinic with a blood test that are really applicable right now that are safe and compliant. And when you're in a research setting, you oftentimes do research sometimes just to do research. So you get findings that evolves. You can write a grant or get money and to do more findings on top of that. That's great. But we really weren't seeing it get applied to the patient. And my example in my story was we had a blood test that I co-developed with my team that could test senescent cells that I mentioned earlier. And it was super simple and actually really affordable. And you can imagine that being integrated into a clinic like a primary care clinic, where you could do these tests and collect data and validate the tests, but really use that to inform your treatment decisions and inform how healthy your patient is using this novel technique. And it was never going to see the light of day. We were using it for
Hmm.
research purposes. So that really got me thinking, like, man, and also in my dissertation, one of the therapeutics I used to reverse some of these oxidation signals I was seeing, I was measuring lipid peroxidation. It's a long story, it's boring. But vitamin E was one of the interventions. We could reduce all this neuron cell death just by supplementing vitamin E. It's more complicated than that, but generally speaking, vitamin E alone moved the needle in this model. And it wasn't the answer, but it really moved the needle. And so it was like, man, this is like people should know this. This should be a part of your typical routine. And most people take vitamin E, but things like this got me thinking, I really want to talk to people more and I really want to help people more. And I want to provide not only knowledge and education to weed out the bad actors in the snake oil, but I want to help people, reach their goals and do simple things to really improve their health span. So it wasn't, it's, as you know, with startups, it's not money driven really because you don't make any, there's no money to be made in the startup. But it's been really fun and it's much more engaging. I really prefer to engage with the clients and I like the success stories. I like to see them feeling better. We're chasing symptoms at the end of the day, and it's nice to see that what we're doing in some ways is working really well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Now, with that chasing symptoms, have you ever, is that pretty common in sort of your industry and just medical stuff in general? Or are there anybody out there that's doing a more proactive approach, kind of what you mentioned with the um, supplementation and
hmm
a healthier lifestyle, healthier diet, fitness, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of that going on. I think what's happening is there's too much information out there and too many offerings. It's like what's really working. It's also worth mentioning that, I'm not a physician. I'm a scientist. I mean, we have a medical director. I work with a physician closely. But we don't do things for diagnostic use here, right? We really draw that line there. And so if we find something I might be getting off topic slightly here, but really quickly,
Yep.
if we find something that stands out in the blood work, we would call that an incidental finding, and then we would then send them to their primary care physician or send them to the expert that could help, the endocrinologist, whatever, mention that might be worth exploring. So we really try to draw a line on diagnostic, disease modifying or disease targeting approaches to medicine, because we are a clinic, but we're really a wellness clinic, right? So we use the blood work and the bio data to just inform us of what could be kind of deficient, what can we improve upon, was really towards an optimization of wellness and health span as our attempt. And so it's just a really important line that we have to draw in the sand. But yeah, I mean, we would certainly subscribe to the idea that the preventative therapy, if you will, is certainly the way to go. And I will say too, oftentimes what that is, which we don't sell because you can't sell this, it's usually lifestyle stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
most of the conversations I have are we break down alcohol intake, what that looks like, what they're eating, and how much they're moving. You kind of want to move more, eat less. Oftentimes that's the beginning, to be quite frank. And and so like that's always integrated in. We have a nutritionist here on staff who's fantastic. And we have some tools that can help us see your nutritional metrics, if you will, like micronutrient levels, etc. But it usually starts there. And that's really the foundation. And then the things we provide here at Bay State, these holistic therapies, those are really the optimizing agents. Those are the ones that are making that 15% change at the end, where you're reducing inflammatory markers, you're reducing pain, you're feeling better, their cognitive performance is better. But the foundation is really the lifestyle factors. And from a preventative care lens, or through a preventative care lens, that's really where it all begins. And I incorporate fasting. I always try to mention that and stuff. And like, so with dietary things, but yeah, it's actually kind of simple in some ways in the beginning. Yeah.
Right, right, definitely.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what kind of technologies are you guys leveraging to serve your customers to build this telehealth product? Are you using any AI? Are you using any cloud services? What's kind of
hmm
your technology stack, so to speak?
Sure. And I'm the worst person to ask the details of the technology stack. But
Okay.
I'll answer your question. But the nitty gritty of some of the AI tools we plan to use very soon. I won't be able to speak uh, too in detailed about that. But I will say here at Bay State, we have technology for tracking wellness for one, which is worth mentioning. We do brain scans, and we do all the genetic testing and epigenetic testing and blood biomarker testing. I kind of put that in the technology bucket, if you will. But then interpreting that requires some aid. So we certainly have tools to help us with that. We also utilize a lot of these kind of consolidated vendor platforms. Maybe it's the wrong term, but like we do blood work, right? So we use a platform
Mhm.
called Rupa that allows us to access various different labs that exist, so we can get all of the curated blood work we want with the tubes here on site to then send out to multiple labs through one package. Um,
Mm.
and that platform allows us to easily navigate a large portfolio of blood biomarker options. That's a big deal for us. And then what we will soon start doing on the AI front with the new telemedicine company is we're going to partner with a company called Brain One. They're a new company. I'm friends with the owner, but they have a fantastic platform. And what they have is a protocol driven approach that uses AI to integrate personal data, medical data, which we can provide through our EMR or EHR. We use Tebra, and they could populate that medical history, if you will, along with all their biomarker data and along with all their EEG data. Really briefly, we,
Mm.
we use brain scans to get EEG data to track cognitive performance and things like that. It can consolidate that. Brain One does this, and it can spit out a curated and personalized protocol through an app tracking system to allow us to not only communicate with the patient, but have a personalized protocol based on their biometrics that can change over
Mhm.
time. So that integration and these protocols are also derived from PubMed studies and other protocols that have been published. The AI itself grabs from that pool of NCBI technology. This is not my technology. This is Brain One, because we're not in the business of creating AI tools. We want to leverage smart people that have great AI tools. But that's one really prominent one that not only saves time and money, to be honest, because a lot of the protocols are now developed with AI in this tool. We just kind of, look at them and polish them up. That saves a lot of time and effort, and it's a great tool for the client as well, because they're seeing this evidence based approach that importantly is based on their personalized data. So evidence based from NCBI and NIH, and personalized based on their biometrics, which could be the wearable. Depends on what they come to the table with, but it'll be medical history, a wearable, EEG data, brain scans, obviously a ton of blood work. And then we do that, systematically. So they get more data every 3 months or so, depends on the program they're in. And that's a fantastic tool for us that we're very excited to use for sure.
Sounds super cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's get a little more philosophical, metaphysical. What do you think about AI in general? Do you think it's a boon for humanity, or do you think it's going to be our downfall?
Wow, that's the question of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I figured I'd ask.
Yeah, I'm not the person to know all the answers there for sure, but
Well, I don't
it's
think any of us can know the
yeah.
answers.
No, you're
It's
totally
just,
right.
yeah.
I tend to agree with the Altman response to this to some degree. He is very biased, obviously, because he's got a
Yeah.
company that's going to go public soon, probably breaking all the records for a public company. um, but I think it's going to replace. I think about my industry a lot, right? So it's like, I think about how's this going to affect what I'm doing. I think what it'll certainly get rid of is the coders, the coaching elements, like I'm sorry, like online virtual kind of coaching things. I just mentioned the
Mm.
brain one earlier. That's going to replace some of that stuff. I'm a consultant on the side as well. I think a lot of my consulting will disappear with these tools, but
Oh,
it's really that patient engagement, the bedside element. It's almost like doctors are more replaceable with this technology in theory because the treatment algorithm can be spit out from AI, and then you have a robot that does the procedure in theory. But that bedside portion, that human to human interaction, the nurses almost are less replaceable than the physician. This is my musings, obviously.
of
So for
course.
me here, like I see that these tools will help us tremendously to personalize our care, to better understand our patient, and to have really optimized protocols and look at very specific biomarkers that we can track. We are doing that now, somewhat poorly. We'll do it better over time. But that concierge human to human care, oftentimes with a nurse, honestly, I don't think that's replaceable. So we have, and that's a big component of our business. Obviously, we have concierge medicine as a major element for now and in the future. So I think, for me personally, I think that it's the human to human interaction of healthcare. I don't think is going to be replaced, but I do think the treatment approach in a good way will be optimized and updated. And on the grand scheme of things, and the grand scale for humanity as a whole, that's a different question. I don't. Maybe universal basic income is important. I don't know. But, I have no idea. But yeah. Again, I think there's always going to be an element of human to human in healthcare that you just can't replace. I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's
Yeah.
interesting you say that because uh, I feel the same way. I use AI tools to sift through data and spit out reports and help write
Yeah.
documentation and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, in my industry, in IT and cybersecurity, there are a lot of the entry level positions that are being taken over by AI. And a lot of those entry level positions are the um, human interaction positions. So, like your tier one help desk positions, you no longer call tech support and talk to a real person. You talk to a chatbot and, maybe then get escalated. But it's, in my personal opinion, I think it has made tech support worse. in It makes it
I'm surprised
better.
you said that. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it makes it better on. There's something to be said, like as a business owner, having an AI agent or multiple AI agents taking care of that saves money as far as you don't have to have as much of a head count for your tech support. However, the in my experience, when you are actually interacting with a real person, there's something to be said there, especially with technology. You're frustrated because your computer doesn't work or because you can't log into whatever. Um, a computer doesn't understand that you're frustrated and can't empathize with you. And
I feel this all the time. I mean, I had to
yeah,
talk to my insurance company yesterday. It's interesting though that we could probably talk about this for a while because I think you're so ingrained in this actual area. But we're exploring currently. We're exploring
mm,
some AI based tools using a consultant that will allow us to kind of have a chat bot to some degree with our patients for follow up studies. When you do a clinical study, you have a lot of what we call follow up outcome measures and things. Oftentimes they're questionnaires and you just answer this or that. How do you feel, pain, etc. That does save a lot of time and effort by having that automated. The tool looks pretty great, but the claim from these tools is that no, this is not like your typical automated push one for this. We can understand. It's very, very conversational, works great. I'm like, well, if that's the case, that's great. But I'm with you. That human element when you're needing the chatbot or you're needing to talk to someone about your medicine or your symptoms or yourself, it's so disconnected from reality. It's so disconnected from that human experience, which makes people feel safe and heard, which in medicine is so important.
hmm
So I'm when you said that, I was like, oh man, maybe we should reconsider this AI tool to help us talk to because we'd hate a bad experience in that arena. You want people to have a good experience with talking about their health and recovery, especially.
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Well, and
yeah,
there's probably lots of people that disagree with me on that front, but that there, and maybe for something like what you're describing, where the customer is just giving you the baseline information, what's my pain level, what symptoms am I experiencing, that sort of thing. Maybe it's okay just to collect that data and then move on to talking to a real person. Um, I don't know. I think it's different for each industry.
yeah,
Um, and you have to think, like, again, for IT and cybersecurity, the other problem that's more internal, that's not really seen from the outside as much, as the the advice that used to be given to people that wanted to break into technology or cybersecurity was, once you're finished with your schooling, go get a tier one help desk job and work your way up, and that's how you get experience to get the higher paying,
yeah.
more complex jobs. Um, Now, basically, all those tier one jobs are gone, and so all these mid level jobs require experience, but there's no way for you to get that experience. I don't know if that's the same kind of in your industry or not now, but
Yeah, I've heard what you just said before. That makes a ton of sense. I mean, I mean, here we're not seeing it so much because again, we're if anything, we're just cutting out people to have a patient experience that works better. Like they can come inside the studio and walk into their room and use it more quickly, etc. But I think again in healthcare, the human to human interaction thing I think is always going to be there. In science, that's also really interesting too. Again, this is a longer conversation, but it's a lot of things I did when developing scientific tools, when pursuing hypothesis driven projects or experiments, and more importantly, when writing grants to get funding for science. That a lot of that can be done quite well with AI assistance, even just ChatGPT, like basic experimental design. And so I think there'll be a lot more effects in the research industry, honestly. And so you just mentioned like how that could affect people that are in a career field that requires hurdles to jump through, development. And in science, in my field, it's it's undergraduate, then grad school, then the fellowship, and then the real job. A lot of that stuff in between can be cut out in many ways. Like I can tell you right now, ChatGPT 2 is better than me as a grad student. And so it's like, when are those tools going to replace the bad ideas and the bad writing that the graduate student would have? And so, or is it just to write a passage where it's like, you know what, you still got to do it, but you become more important as you get to that PI level investigator. But yeah, I'm curious to see where it goes. But I'm an entrepreneur now, I guess. No more academic science.
well, yeah, you could be a scientist and an entrepreneur at the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
time.
yeah. Yeah. So sometimes I feel bad. I mean, I'm certainly a scientist. I am, but more recently, I've been out of the loop from the bench, So I'm reading more books about finance or VC stuff or advertising, where I'm doing more meetings that involve those things. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of the same with me. I'm a tech guy.
yeah.
I'm not a marketer or anything, but I've been reading a lot of marketing books and stuff. I yeah, I know what you mean. How do you keep your passion alive when having to deal with all these other business responsibilities?
Oh, yeah. It is. It's actually kind of easy, I think, because I'm doing what I want to do. I'm very fortunate, and I think it's one of those things where I might not be doing what I was trained to do in some ways, as a scientist in training, but kind of somewhat paradoxically or somewhat ironically, I also wouldn't be where I'm at now if I didn't have all that, like the connections I made, the way I think about things, on my contributions to what we're doing here with longevity medicine, et cetera. So it's like it's good. I'm in a better environment because I'm pursuing my own ideas with a team, but our collective team ideas as leadership, which is great. I like the high risk, high reward environment, and I get to see satisfaction from clients and people. And that part's really great. And it's just more people engaging. There's more engagement on that front. So like that passion's kind of always there. I'm pretty fortunate. But I will say, yeah, as you know, with a startup, there's headaches around every corner. And I'm fundraising right now for one company still. We're not completely closed out. That's can be a nightmare. So
Yeah,
it's like the eye on the prize kind of approach where it's like, but if we get this and we can do this, we can do these amazing things that are novel. And someone becomes a scientist, I think, namely because they're curious, but they want to be part of something no one else is kind of doing and very novel. That's the selfish element of being a scientist.
yeah,
Um, and you really are on like the very tip of of the bubble of the evolution of medicine. Um, and so like I get kind of motivated by that, to be honest, where it's like we're gonna do, even if it's a business direction, we're gonna execute better and do better, and we're gonna add to what we know. So there's always an R&D component to everything we do, you know. So like with the stem cell stuff in Florida, we have a device we're working on, et cetera, that's different. So I
mm,
think the seeking out the novelty of whatever I'm doing, business or some science, is really what kind of motivates me. And I like
mm.
this environment to do that in better. This sandbox is more fun than behind a bench with a pipetter, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you get to kind of do what you want, and you get to fund your own projects to a certain extent where you don't
Yeah.
have to win grants and that sort of thing, I would assume.
Yeah, that's daunting. That's really what an
I'm sure.
academic does. It's manuscripts and grants, and then dealing with students. I mean, God bless them. We gotta have them. I love these traditional academic scientists, but it was a little too mundane for me. Yet very important, but
Yes.
mundane to
Yeah.
me. Yes.
Yeah. Definitely. Well,
Yeah.
so it sounds like you guys deal with a lot of sensitive personal information. I mean, not just, names and phone numbers and addresses and stuff, but you're talking about like um, uh, blood work and EKG scans and all that kind of stuff. How do you keep all of that information secure and ensure that your clients can trust you with all that information?
I should probably be asking you that. But but we have our compliant tools. Like I mentioned that platform earlier, Rupa, right? So they have a kind of HIPAA compliant encrypted way of storing certain things and in all their results. We oftentimes will. There actually seems to be, and I could be wrong here, a difference of opinion on the allowability of discussing said results through certain virtual meeting platforms like a Google Meet or a Zoom. Some people will say it's okay if it's discussed in this manner. Some won't. So we really try to have our consults on site for the on site clinics. For the telemed, we have a company that's helping us encrypt things. We have a virtual tool to have meetings, etc. But here we try to do everything on site when we can. I'm actually in a consult room right now. And we have a big screen that we can show things like that too.
Mm,
But
mm.
nothing special. I mean, besides what these platforms provide to us, they're encrypted, HIPAA compliant storage modalities. But other than that, I don't know of any other protected tools. We don't have a file cabinet. with printed materials. Yeah.
A file
Uh,
cabinet with a lock and key.
yeah.
Yeah.
But what do you
Uh,
suggest? I mean, I feel like you probably are
well,
very knowledgeable on this topic. Yeah.
well, yeah. I mean, we help secure businesses all the time that
Yeah.
need to be HIPAA compliant or whatever other compliance standard. PCI DSS is another big one that we deal with. That's credit card processing and stuff. Uh, I mean, for HIPAA, as long as all the tools you're using are HIPAA compliant, you should be good. And then, HIPAA has certain rules on your data needs to be encrypted at rest and in transit. So, if you're storing any information locally on servers or computers, then they need to have, full disk encryption, and you need to make sure that your network is isolated properly and encrypted properly. As far as like the video conferencing that you were talking about, um,
Yeah.
giving
Yeah.
people that sensitive information, um, most of the time, people just do it in person, like what you're saying,
Yeah.
or most of the telehealth. I've never worked with like a telehealth or teleclinic before, so I don't know exactly what they do to maintain that compliance. But I would assume that they use um, most of their own tools because I don't know that any of the main video conferencing platforms are end-to-end encrypted in the way that would be HIPAA compliant, like Google Meet and
Yeah.
Teams might be, but Teams is awful to work with. I hate Teams.
I hate Teams as well.
Yeah, yeah,
I've had more problems with Teams. But yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So then, but I would assume since you're dealing with all this, you have to be HIPAA compliant. Are there any other compliance standards that you're beheld to? Do you know?
Oh, well, on the digital realm or technology realm, that's
Uh,
basically it. But we have a lot of compliance with the procedural elements of the clinic. It's like for IVs, etc. And like we have to.
mhm.
There's state and nation and federal compliance rules for infusion therapy that are we always have to obviously pay close attention to. So we have a clean area and a hood here that we can do with negative pressure to mix, to do ad mixes, small ad mixes for IVs, and obviously the standards for disposal of the waste, etc. You can imagine those things. Nothing too crazy, nothing too obscure. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
The the biggest compliance thing was probably the facilities themselves to be ADA compliant.
Oh.
That was interesting to navigate. I mean, we obviously care about being ADA compliant and certainly wish to have our services available to everyone and anyone. But that was draconian at times. But we navigated that. We're also downstairs. There's an elevator, but
Hmm.
it's hard to get to us. So just naturally because of the location, not too many ADA qualified individuals come in. But yeah, we had more of that, I would say, on the facilities side for compliance than really anything else. We had
Sure.
more pressure from that, which is fair and fine, than we did with the infusion therapy itself. It's almost
Huh.
easier to like poke someone with drugs than to have a room that doesn't have a certain dimension to it for the shower. It was interesting.
Huh.
But yeah,
That is interesting. Well,
yeah,
I would assume, and it's just an assumption, that most of your clientele would not uh, fit into that person that would need an ADA compliant area.
they definitely don't. And so, but that argument doesn't really work with this, with the city and with the state. I mean, and I get it, but it's kind of like these rules that are not really malleable. And so, we had to have, we certainly have way above our needed ability to service that community of people than is necessary. But that just kind of is what it is. But it is kind of interesting. You'd think that there would be like, okay, well, this is obviously not going to be, these services probably won't be provided to this class of individual a ton. So maybe it's
Hmm.
like a different, but no, it's the same kind of requirement facilities wise across the board. So it's a
Yeah.
catch 22 because on one hand, you really support that these regulations exist. I wouldn't change a thing. I think it's important that we always have that as part of a facility requirement. but
Hmm.
you can go down a rabbit hole. I mean, at my last institution, for example, we had a research laboratory that we had some things in a back storage room that was clearly a storage room, but even the dimensions of that had to be accessible for a wheelchair or something. But it wasn't a meeting room; it was like a storage. It's like, well, no one's going to be in here, much less someone in a wheelchair. So it is kind of draconian at times, but it just is what it is. It's fine.
I wonder if their justification for something like that is, well, but what if you hired somebody who is in a wheelchair or something like
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Yeah.
It comes from a good place, and there's probably been some bad actors in the past that have taken advantage of that. So we're more than happy to be compliant in that arena. It's just kind of interesting to the how I guess my point is I found it interesting how the oversight there was so much more than some of the clinical oversight that we had. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, they got that. They're certainly on top of the ADA requirements. But you know, drug therapies, infusions, that's fine. But we are
Uh,
100% compliant, and like I would say, we're even more compliant than other competitors, which I will not name. But you can see some bad actors in this space where they're performing, IVs or injections in settings that maybe might not be the most clean. It's never going to be sterile, but maybe not the most clean, or it's in a public setting.
mm,
We have IVs in the public setting, but we also offer the private rooms if they want to, and that actually has been nice. So the blood work in IVs, it's optional to have in a consult room, and patients really
mm,
like that
mm.
because it's private.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Well,
Yeah.
we're running up on time here. Seely, what's one last thing that you would like to let our listeners know? Like what's one last chunk of knowledge you could impart to them?
Oh man, like about business, science, anything like.
Whatever you want.
um. Oh man, what would I say? I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is the lifestyle stuff we talked about earlier. Most people think it's being healthy or increasing health span or wellness interventions are complicated. It's usually pretty simple. It's usually a little bit of eat less and move more.
Mm,
Don't overcomplicate things. In the client or patient experience in this space, this wellness space, is by far the most important. And if that can be going back to our human to human thing, if that can be human to human, it's so much better. And I gave you one example earlier of the actual giving of care, giving an IV, whatever it is, that bedside kind of manner. This also applies to when discussing their results or something. So oftentimes with people get hung up on, we need to have a really amazing report that looks awesome. It's colorful. It's a really digestible report. People would much rather have someone that's with expertise to talk to about it and walk them through it than some detailed, pretty, crazy report. So in this space, which is retail medicine, that human to human interaction, especially at times in the expert to client interaction, face to face, goes 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 all the way. I mean, that's like probably the most important thing. Because we thought in the beginning, like, let's automate all we can. Actually, we have front desk people now just because they can offer them some tea and they
mhm,
can walk them to their room, and they
mhm.
and they love that experience. It's engaging to them. And so in this space I've learned that it's paramount.
Yeah, definitely more personal that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for joining us. Where can people find you?
Oh, I'm on social. I'm Aspen Longevity Doc, and then Bay State Longevity here in Aspen, Colorado. You can Google Bay State Longevity. You can find our services and offerings.
Cool. Very cool. Well, thank you again, Celia, and thank you all for listening. You can find this podcast on YouTube and Spotify, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, Brian.